It's a pleasure to, there we go. It's a pleasure to be here. I am not an economist, but I was interested very much in working with Dr. Schwaib. He and I are colleagues. We've written a textbook together. And I'm very interested in his interest in rebuilding Sudan. And we were talking, and I said, well, I wonder if the Japanese experience of rebuilding after World War II might be of interest. And I told him that my brother-in-law has been a resident of Japan for about 45 years. And he is very well connected with especially the auto industry, and he has edited and prepared annual reports for Toyota and some other companies. And so I was visiting with him in Japan several years ago, and I mentioned to him, oh, I guess we're not getting any sound.
We hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay. So I mentioned to my brother-in-law that I was interested in the miracle that occurred after World War II with Japan. I mean, it was just decimated by the war effort, and many cities were leveled. And so I wanted to know how did they recover from that? And so he sent me this book, Embracing Defeat, Japan in the Wake of World War II. And this is written by John Dower. He's a professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. The book is a Pulitzer Prize winner, and I found it very interesting. And I was telling Abdel about this, and he said, well, Steve, why don't you give a report to the Federation of Sudanese Engineers? And I said, well, I'm not qualified to do that. And he pointed out I have the book. So I said, I can give a book report on that. So that's what my presentation is about. Next slide. See, Abdel, can you forward it?
Yeah, I'm trying to do it, but it's not moving. So let's try it again. For some reason, it's not advancing. So let me just go back to escape. All right, you can do it again.
Maybe you would like to make a PowerPoint presentation mode. Yeah, good.
Good.
Yeah, no, but you can move.
So just to kind of graphically point out what was going through my mind, I had this picture in my mind of the city of Hiroshima after the atomic bomb. And this was representative of not only Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but the fire bombings that had gone on in Tokyo and other cities. And then I looked at a picture of Hiroshima in 2019, and a vital city with a lot of industry. So I had many questions that came to my mind, and about how did Japan recover and become the second largest economy by 1989. So some of the questions that I had was, what happened to the Japanese people right after they surrendered? What role did the USA play in rebuilding Japan? How did Japan go from an emperor ruled society to a democracy? how did world events impact the rebuilding of the rebuilding effort? And then what lessons might we apply to the rebuilding of Sudan?
Same problem.
Uh,
Let's see.
So first thing I wanted to do was kind of start making a timeline to kind of keep this clear in my mind. And I went all the way back to the restoration of the Meiji. And this is when Japan was opened up in 1867 and started trade with the rest of the world. And I was surprised. I didn't realize, but in 1918, there actually was a constitution and a kind of a semi-democratic society was developed in Japan, and that lasted until 1932. And in 1932, military folks took over control of the country. And their major concern was the need for a lot of raw materials. Japan's a small country, doesn't have a lot of natural resources, so it looked to the Pacific as a source of raw materials. And then the thought was, well, they needed to build a Japanese empire that controlled that area to gain those natural resources. And World War II, at least for the United States, broke out on December 7th, 1941, when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. And there was a war with the United States and other allies. And it came to a conclusion in September 2nd of 1945. The atomic bombs were dropped in August. So that's kind of the starting point then of the rebuilding effort. Was started in September of 1945. Next slide.
I'm trying. Oops. Yep.
Okay, good. So on August 15th of 1945, the Emperor Hirohito gave a radio message and really called on his people to surrender. And he finished with saying, we have resolved to pave the way for a grand peace for all the generations to come by enduring the unendurable and suffering what is unsufferable. And that really did set a good way of thinking for the Japanese people. And they looked forward to the Allies coming in, restoring democracy, and helping them to build their economy. To do that, the United States was concerned. The Cold War was starting. They were concerned that the Russians would want to take over Japan and control the Pacific. So the United States moved forward to be in charge of the occupying Allies. And they promoted General Douglas MacArthur to become the supreme commander of the Allied powers. And this was called SCAP. And this was done on August 14th. On September the 2nd of 1945, the Japanese government formally surrendered and signed their surrender instrument on the USS Missouri. Okay, so what was the situation as the war concluded? Well, first of all, and most important, millions of people in Japan were without homes or adequate food. Many cities were destroyed, not only homes, but factories and the infrastructure. Now, Japan, its agricultural economy was not able to feed all of its citizens, but it was a fairly significant part of the economy, but it was owned by large landowners. And these landowners really had the Japanese people who worked the land were really vassals. So it was a very feudal system. So that was something that needed to be addressed. Also, there were all these Japanese military servicemen who were demobilized. So a lot of unemployed folks, in addition, a lot of laid off factory workers, especially from the war factories. And as I mentioned before, the Japanese followed their emperor. At that time, he was considered a god, and whatever he said, the Japanese people followed. So the Japanese were tired of war, and they blamed their own military leaders for the situation that had been created. There was still a pretty effective Japanese bureaucracy that had built up during the war. The economy was ruled primarily by a small group of family holding companies called the Zaibatsu, and they control the economy. And if you look at the Japanese people, they were coming out of the war. They were hungry, without shelter, but they were hardworking. They wanted peace. And if you looked at the educational levels, it was pretty high. They had developed a lot of engineering and management capabilities as a result of this war economy. So those were the conditions that faced General MacArthur as he entered Japan as the leader of the occupying forces. Next slide. I think we want to go the other way. So this was the United States' immediate post-war thinking. The first and primary thought was keep Japan from rearming. The next was avoid Japan from deciding communism is the answer. So this was really the beginning of the Cold War. So they wanted to take occupation role instead of the Soviets. They wanted to establish a democratic government, and they wanted to meet the immediate survival needs of the Japanese people. But they also wanted to punish Japan, and they wanted war reparations. Their feeling was Japan caused this, let them be responsible for the rebuilding. But an effective Japanese bureaucracy still existed, and they thought they could utilize this. Their vision was for Japan to be an agricultural and domestic consumer economy with limited trade. So what were these zaibatsus? Well, they were family held, they were vertically integrated, they were big business conglomerates that controlled the Japanese economy. An example was Mitsubishi. Eventually, they were dissolved by the Supreme Allied Commander, SCAP, and they were replaced by these Keiretsu. These were like the Zaibatsu, but they were more horizontally integrated. They were not led by families, but by groups of banks, manufacturers, suppliers, and distributors. So the US and the Japanese had very different expectations for Japan. The United States government and SCAP really looked upon this as a punitive and reformist occupation. They were going to emphasize the agricultural and light industry, really to return Japan back to where they were in the 1920s. Their plan was to confiscate heavy industry as war reparations. They wanted to limit the influence of Japan on the rest of Asia. They wanted to limit the trade and limit that to cheap consumer type goods. They wanted to break up big business and the Zaibatsu holding companies. They wanted to use existing Japanese bureaucracy to implement regulations and economy. And they were willing to overlook many war criminals to keep the economy going. So representative of this is this little Japanese post-war tin car. I had many of those growing up. And if you turned it upside down, it said made in Japan. That was the US's thinking. That was the kind of economy that they envisioned, making those kind of cheap goods. So what did the Japanese think about this? They had a completely different idea of what recovering from the war would be. They wanted to be like America, and they thought America would restore their pre-war capitalism and culture. Initially, the Japanese were optimistic, enthusiastic about the US occupation. Their hopes were that they would be able to attain a living standard similar to that in America. And the US was coming more as a liberation than an occupation force. And the people expected the war criminals to be prosecuted. They blamed their own military. The Zaibatsu companies, they were planning to remain and continue with heavy trade with the rest of Asia. Got to remember that the Zaibatsus had existed before the war, and they had a lot of contacts with American industry, and they thought, oh, we'll just get back to the way it was in the 20s. The bureaucracy that existed wanted to emphasize heavy industry production and trade. And you can see pictures, they envisioned shipbuilding and steel production, not making little tin cars. The government, through the Bank of Japan, had to start printing a lot of money to meet the expectations of all these demobilized soldiers and laid off factory workers. And the planners in Japan wanted to emphasize, as I said, heavy industry, steel, chemicals, shipbuilding, etc. Next slide. So you can see that there was a lot of differences of opinion when General MacArthur took over. So SCAP, their goal was demilitarization and democratization. And that was pretty effective for the rest of 1945 and 1946. A big decision from MacArthur was to not punish Hirohito, who had been the head of the Japanese government. And a lot of people thought he should have been tried as a war criminal. But MacArthur felt it was more important to enlist Hirohito's help in getting the Japanese to accept the new realities. So as I said, the Japanese initially welcomed US as liberators from Japanese military rule. They were willing to follow what SCAP provided. Also, they appreciated the fact that the US contributed over $2 billion in immediate aid in the form of food and other necessities for the Japanese people. One of the first things SCAP did was effect land reform. They bought up these large tracts of land held by these large landowners, and then they sold it at lower prices to individual Japanese citizens, so that there could be a lot of individual farms. This also provided a place for a lot of the people that were out of work to go back into agriculture and work for these small farms. Another big implementation was for democracy. And SCAP guided the Constitution being put together. But it was the Japanese people themselves that really wanted Article 9 of the Constitution, which was prohibiting militarization. And they also introduced the idea of equality for women. Now, this is a significant impact on the Japanese economy. As you know, the US economy and most large economies around the world spend a lot of their GDP on gross national product on military. And here the United States was saying, we're going to provide that military protection so Japan will not rearm. Japanese people were really for this. The breakup of big business to small businesses could start and exist. So that was one of their ideas of breaking up the zaibatsus, was to get smaller companies to form. They weren't totally successful with this, and they were stalling. They didn't attack this as quickly as they did putting together the Constitution. But they did want to help the Japanese establish strong unions. The unions were taken out of business during the war effort, wanted to reestablish them and make them even stronger. And the Japanese people were really pushing for lifetime employment. And that was kind of a trade. They would give a lot of loyalty to companies, but they wanted to be in charge. I think we've gone the wrong way here. Okay, so we've gone through kind of the democratization. Now we're going to go to a kind of a timeline to look at this. So here we are after World War II. The first basically year and a half was this emphasis on demilitarization and democratization. But even then, the United States said, yes, we will protect you from outside military intervention, but they were pushing the Japanese to come up with an American-style police force that would be semi-military to at least control Japan. And at that time, the United States decided to support all the different ideas that were in the Japanese mind at this time, and including communist and socialistic parties. And they allowed the government to print money, a lot of money. So let's see what happened next. Well, first of all, there were really some early successes of this democratization and demilitarization. One example would be Honda. Honda Katsukuro supplied piston rings to Toyota during the war. Just a small company. In 1946, he decided to be entrepreneurial and make motorized bicycles, which was a real solution to the lack of transportation in Japan at the time. And he used the engines that were originally developed for the war communication systems. That got him started, and by 1949, he had established the Honda Motor Company. And as you know today, Honda is a very big supplier of vehicles, and they've even got into the aerospace business. And then there were other companies that had supplied war-type material. For example, those who made optical instruments like Nikon and Canon. And they became strong in this new economy as well. But there were also some downsides. There was a start of inflation, and there was this lack of accountability as the government, as the U.S. SCAP decided to work with the existing bureaucracy and even overlook some of these war criminals in order to get the economy going. And because there was a lot of money floating around now, there was a lot of corruption as well as inflation. SCAP was slow to break up the Zaibatsu holding companies. They kept putting off taking over heavy industry for war reparations, and that allowed the Japanese to continue their view of what they wanted after the war, of a more heavy-duty economy. And they allowed the Japanese government to direct a lot of the economy. So the result of all that was a reverse course. And this was driven, one of the major drivers was the shift in Japanese occupation due to Cold War developments. China had become communist. The Russians were taking over satellite countries. And so the US felt Japan really needed to become a Cold War ally. To do this, as I mentioned before, they intensified their letting of wartime leaders re-enter the government. And now they started a red purge to get rid of communists and socialists instead of letting them be active in government. And they tended to the US was slowing down and reducing reparations because they wanted to build up the Japanese economy to be a Cold War ally. And they allowed the Japanese to direct more of the economy. So the economy was moving away from this US vision of limited light industry and agriculture to more the Japanese desires to be a heavy industry economy. But this inflation was just rampant. This was demoralizing the Japanese people. And so they finally implemented the Dodge line. And we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. And we'll talk about it right now. So the Dodge line was drafted by Joseph Dodge, who is an American economist. And it provided financial and monetary contraction of the Japanese economy to help them gain stabilization, to get rid of the high inflation that would lead to economic independence. And it was a major part of this reverse course. The reverse course was more than just the Dodge line and the contraction of the economy. It was also the Japanese people. Here they had started after the war, very optimistic and hopeful. And now they were faced with all this inflation. Their idea was that the people were going to be held accountable in the military for what Japan had endured during the war. And instead, many of these people were allowed to become government leaders. But the Dodge line eliminated government subsidies. And this was a very important thing. It established a single exchange rate for the yen that devalued the yen and made exports more desirable for importing to other countries. And they went a long way to abolish the black market that had developed. So the Dodge line was restrictive for the Japanese people, but it did start taming inflation. Then there was a big change. Korean War broke out. That war started on June 25th of 1950. And the picture is an American jet aircraft dropping napalm bombs made by the Japanese on the North Koreans. So the US realized that, oh my gosh, we've got to fight this Korean War. It's very expensive and difficult to transfer a lot of these supplies from mainland US. It would be much better to have those manufactured in Japan. So they came up with this special procurements, and it did revive the Japanese economy, although it upset many of the Japanese because here they were moving back to a wartime more economy. And so SCAP allowed the Japanese to really move even more into the Japanese vision of having a heavy industry economy. This is a really important point. The war economy emphasized mass production. The supplies that the United States needed to fight the war in Korea required a lot of individual items that they procured. So mass production became a key element of the Japanese industries. The Japanese were allowed to import a lot of US production equipment and technology in order to supply the Korean War. This included even licenses for US patents. And this is a major point. There was a man in United States, Edward Deming, and he was really pushing quality approach to manufacturing. And the US industries really gave him a deaf ear. They were interested in short-term profits and not really focusing on quality. But the Japanese were interested in this, and they were very receptive to Deming's ideas. And so this was a major building block for the Japanese economy that was to come. So the Korean War really helped improve the economy, but the Japanese were very concerned about them moving more to a military-based economy. Next. So let's talk a little bit more about Edward Deming. You know, he brought many people, especially engineers, we think of him with statistical quality control. And he certainly introduced that, but he introduced much more than that into the idea of how to run a business to create quality production. He came up with these 14 points, and it was a new philosophy. It was the idea of not working the worker to death, but to educating the worker to strive for quality, and profitability would follow. Rather than focusing on short-term profits, it was the long-term building of successful mass production. And for example, number 11, eliminate numerical quota for the workforce. So it was completely a different way of looking at production than what was being developed in the United States. This was to really benefit Japan in the future. Next. So a big change for the Japanese people, who really liked General MacArthur, and who General MacArthur had really allowed the Japanese to make a lot of their own decisions. He was fired by President Truman on the 11th of April, 1951. MacArthur had been very good for the Japanese. He'd been very effective there, but he was also in charge of the Korean War. And he was more than a bit arrogant. He believed he knew better how to run the war than the non-military administration. And of course, the United States is built on the idea that the citizens, through their representatives, make war decisions, not the military. So he came out with a communique that was basically offering a surrender to the communists with certain provisions, instead of going through the president, Truman at the time. And Truman just couldn't abide by this, and he finally fired him. Next. So even though MacArthur left, his basic concepts continued, and the war did finally end on July the 27th of 1953, and the demilitarized zone was established and still exists today. So the war was over, and there was some downturn in the economy because the loss of all these special procurements. But basically, the Japanese had been set up to be a mass producer of high technology goods. And there was a demand for that in many countries. So the Japanese economy was really poised to take off. So if we look at the timeline here, after World War II, we have first the SCAP with the idea, pretty simplified idea of let's just de-arm and democratize Japan. And then we have the reverse course with the heating up of the Cold War, where the United States said, well, maybe we better get Japan to be more of a military equipment provider than we had envisioned in the past. And that means we've got to let them develop a lot more heavy industry and technology than we had anticipated originally. And then finally, due to the Korean War, there was a full remilitarization of the Japanese economy to support the war. And that's pretty much where the book stops. There's a little bit of an epilogue in the book that talks a little bit about the success and miracle of the Japanese economy moving forward, but it really didn't go into much detail. He did point out that Japan does become the second largest world economy by the 1980s, and he states that Japan's economic bubble comes to an end in 1989 or early 1990. But there really wasn't a lot of detail about this economic bubble. So I was curious how the SCAP rebuilding was related to both Japan's economic miracle and then its decline. So I did a little additional limited research on the subject. And here are my thoughts. So I'm now going beyond what was in the book. There seems to be a consensus on the major factors influencing both Japan's miracle and demise. However, there seems to be some debate among economists and others relative to the importance of those different factors. So through my brief research, I came up with dividing the post-SCAP economic life of Japan into 3 stages. And I'll talk about those real briefly. So the first was the high increase stage. That was from 1954 to 1972. Here are the government policies. I might point out that Japan became a sovereign nation in 1952, just at the tail end of the Korean War. So by 54, they had really running their own show. They were pushing heavy industrialization. They were really directing their own economy through overloaning to industrial conglomerates through the Bank of Japan. And they relaxed the anti-monopoly laws to really allow these big industries to develop, very similar to what they had with the Zaibatsu, except now it was the Keiretsu. These were not family run, but they were large associations that were horizontally integrated. And they were heavily subsidized by the Japanese government. So they weren't really interested in and worried about short-term profitability for dividends. They just wanted to repay the subsidies that they had been given by the government. So they were willing to take the long view, and that was encouraged by the Japanese government. And that gave them both horizontal and vertical integration, and as I said, this long-term view. In addition, there was a vast increase in domestic consumption. One of the goals was to double the standard of living for the average Japanese household. And so there was a movement away from just food and necessities of life, but to more demand for non-necessity items. And then there was a vast export market for Japanese goods. They were well made, high quality, and other companies wanted them. And because of the devalued yen, they were affordable. Things were going along really well until 1973. And that was when the oil embargo happened. And Japan was importing a lot of oil. Japan has a lot of coal, and but they had moved away from coal and had moved to oil, but they had to import that. So Japan had to make a lot of adjustments and learn how to conserve energy in their manufacturing. They also realized that because this heavy industry was very energy intensive, they needed to also move into high quality technologies. Let's see. There we go. And a big boom for them came with world market for more fuel-efficient cars. The Japanese knew how to make small cars that were fuel efficient, and they had great quality. So the world market opened up for them and really helped their economy, as well as producing quality electronics. I don't know how many folks around the world have Sony Walkmans at the time, but it was pretty prevalent. But also during this time, the monetary policies of the government resulted in a bubble in the Japanese stock market and a real increase in real estate investments. One economist noted that just the price of the value of the gardens around the emperor's palace was worth more than the entire state of California's economy. So there was this huge bubble. And what was resulting there, because of this large amount of exports that Japan's economy was dependent upon, other nations were importing a lot more than they were exporting. So they were running up balance of trade deficits. Let's see, I saw a note here. US and other nations needed to improve their deficits with Japan. So by 1985, they had the Plaza Accords. And this was driven by President Reagan. And at that time, they devalued the dollar in order to stimulate US exports and reduce US imports from Japan. And this had, they thought this would have some negative effects on the Japanese economy, but they didn't realize that it was going to be a major, major effect on the Japanese economy. And by 1990, the miracle of Japan's economy was over, and they were in a recession. And they've really not ever really recovered from that. They've had a pretty lackluster economy since then. So that's kind of the part of my half from the report. And I do have some conclusions from this, or lessons learned that I learned from this. First of all, let's look at just to review the Japanese economic timeline here. We start with the opening up of Japan in 1867, and then the establishment of a semi-democracy in the early 1900s, then the takeover of the economy and the government by military people starting in the early 30s, and that resulted in World War II. At the end of World War II, the US is the occupying force in Japan. They want to control the Pacific against the Soviets in this Cold War environment. They come into Japan with kind of a naive feeling that they would just demilitarize and democratize Japan, and Japan would be kind of a second-rate economy. That changed. They had to reverse their ideas due to the heating up of the Cold War, and then it really became institutionalized because of the Korean War and the US's need for these special procurements. Those special procurements resulted in high mass production, and the interest in the Japanese in quality control, especially as championed by Edward Deming. So Japan left the Cold War ready to become a high exporter of economy of large goods that were of quality. And this resulted in a real high increasing economy from 1954 to 1972, and then a steady economy after the oil embargo. Again, the Japanese were able to modify their economy to adapt to the need to have energy conservation, and certainly exporting fuel-efficient cars was a big boom to their economy. And then there was really the end of the economic miracle in 1990. So if we look at all this, what were some lessons learned from rebuilding a war-torn country? Well, the first thing was there's an immediate need for food and other necessities for the population. And I think that would probably be true with most war-torn countries. That's where you have to. And the United States was very good in focusing on that right away and getting $2 billion of that type of aid to the country. So it seemed to me like the proper thing to do in looking at rebuilding a war-torn country is to do a SWOT analysis, to really look at what are the strengths of the economy and of the people and the industry that they have after the war. What are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? And what are also their opportunities and threats? And I came away from the book thinking that the US probably did not do as good a job as the Japanese themselves in doing this SWOT analysis. The Japanese realized that they did have an economy that they had built up during the war that could export desirable high quality, or at least large heavy duty goods. And they had an educated workforce because there had been a lot of engineering and management developed during the war years. And so they saw an opportunity that the US really didn't see for the Japanese economy. So in looking at what Japan did, I kind of listed some key strategic decisions that has to be made by any country as they're recovering from war. The first one is it going to be a free market or a directed economy? I think the US thought it was going to be more of a laissez-faire free market. The Japanese wanted a more directed economy, and that's what they have. Are we going to have strong labor unions or right to work laws? Again, the movement to strong labor unions ended up being with this idea of lifetime employment. Well, if you have lifetime employment, then you want to focus on the long-term goals of the company, and you're more interested in the company surviving for the long term. And I think that was a major factor for the Japanese economy. You have to look at, are you going to emphasize domestic consumption or exports? What kind of capitalization are you going to have? The degree of military expenditures. Company rebuilding, it might be advantageous for that to really be protected by one of the major superpowers and not have to drain their economy building a lot of military goods to protect their country. Long-term, and really the focus going to be on long-term developments or short-term profit maximization? And the US economy right now is really short-term profit maximization. instead of looking at the long term. The type of government that's going to be, is it going to be democracy, and what level of democracy are they going to have? Emphasis on types of production, raw material extraction, agriculture, heavy industry, high technologies, a mix of those. The degree of long-term planning and forecasting that will be done, the degree of controlling corruption and black markets that are likely to develop as funds come in right after when the start of the rebuilding of the country. This idea of income equality versus rewarded risk-taking. And I think you see that in the US economy right now, is we have a pretty large division of economic well-being among our population, and there's a lot of rewarding of risk-taking. The Japanese took a different view, and they were looking more at this idea of high standard of living for all. The degree of emphasis on education and skill training, and the amount of price inflation versus time. So those are some of the things that I came out of. And now I think it's, so that's my book report. And I'm glad to answer any questions and receive any comments. And then Abdel is going to lead us on in looking at how we might take some of these learnings from what was done in Japan and apply that to rebuilding the Sudan.
Thank you very much, Professor Stephen Trimble. That was an outstanding presentation for that period in Japan. And I hope discussing it all together, we might reach to some conclusions which might help Sudan as your objective. Let me first give a chance to Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib. And I would like to share with you his and to introduce him properly, I would like to tell you that Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib was first graduated as mechanical engineer from University of Khartoum. And then he did his master and doctorate in mechanical engineering in University of Wisconsin in Madison. And why I'm introducing Dr. Abdurrahman, because he's a colleague of Dr. Stephen, and he was behind introducing us to Dr. Stephen. And for the past 9 years, Dr. Shuaib has been a professor of practice in mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering at Arizona State University, same university with Mr. Stephen. And he specialized in design and teaching, capstone products design and development courses. He is also assistant director of the Industrial Assessment Center at ASU, which is funded by DOE. Dr. Shuaib, at some stage, he was in King Fahd University of Petroleum and Mineral in Saudi Arabia as a full professor. And after 35 years of research and teaching, he is now involved in maintenance, engineering, and environment, health, and safety. Dr. Shuaib published over 90 journal and conference publications, 1 book chapter, co-authored 1 book, and 13 technical reports. I can go on with his short CV, but let me gain time and turn the mic to Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib please go ahead.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for the introduction. And I will start by thanking my friend Steve, who is the first person I interacted with when I came to ASU, and actually took over from him. He was teaching the capstone design courses for our senior students, and he decided to retire. So they announced a job for a person to replace him. And at that time, my family, or we were taking the decision of relocating to the US from King Fahd University, and I happened to take over his job, and he retired. But his retirement is only on paper because he never stopped working. And we worked together, we collaborated in many aspects. The most important one is in the capstone design course, which he was teaching, and my involvement in the area of design and increasing design content in engineering programs through our collaboration, King Fahd University collaboration with MIT, encouraged me to go into this field. So when I came, I was given 2 sections, 200 students, and they asked me to teach them capstone. I had to form teams of 6 students each, and they have to come up with societal need, and we have to work with them to design a product that solves the need. And of course, at the end, it has to be not only designed, but they have to have a prototype doing that. That was a big task when I came in, but Steve was kind enough to continue cooperating or helping me navigating that challenge. And he gave me he had a manual for the capstone. He said, you can use it, and I'm around if you have any questions. And he did. He really supported my navigation into this at ASU. And then we decided, we continued to discuss progress on the course and students, how they're doing and so forth. And we're able to develop that manual into a textbook, which is the textbook which we co-authored together. And it is about Stephen. He's not only an engineer, he's also a poet. And he just, in same year when we published our book, he also published this Made to Serve, Made to Last. And I told him that it's interesting enough that many engineers are poets. My colleague Muhammad Tajisir, he is one of my, he's my classmate and also work together in an industry. And he is a poet. And we have also mentioned to him that our first one of our prime ministers, Mahjoub, was a poet, and he was an engineer too. So poetry is not strange to engineers. So that is one just introduction, a short introduction to Steve. Well, he has a lot of really. I just want to mention that looks like there's some issue here. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I just want to quickly say more about Steve. He deserves actually more. He is a mechanical engineer and work in major industries like aerospace, including the International Space Station, in industries, in solar and R&D. And actually he did business development. And he is an MBA instructor, professor of practice. And of course, he has his own consulting company, Trimble Consulting. And he has a passion of giving his time, expertise, and efforts to help. And that's what brought him to this presentation. He always asks me about what's going on in Sudan, especially talking about the war. So he is following up, and he had the passion of helping. He said, okay, how can I help? So when he mentioned about this book, I told him, well, maybe you can start by telling us about the book. So this is the main reason for him to be with us today. And I promise you that he's going to continue with us because he had the passion to do that. And he has a number of good relationships. He was in South Africa at one time. Maybe he can tell us about what he did in South Africa, in addition to being involved in many things. So what I did is, after, I just said, well, let me see, let's first listen to what his experience is with the book, and then I said, well, maybe I can add 1 or 2 slides related to the this talk. And I just went and looked at what are the characteristics of Sudan war. So after 1 year, there are so many bad news. I don't want to read them here, but at least in these 2 slides, you can see what's the situation. And the worst part is that the war in Sudan is growing, more complex, and growing in a larger proportion of the population, as both forces, RSF and SAF, continue mobilizing civilian populations, often along ethnic lines. And that's the most serious part, and to replenish their ranks, and that put complications because rebuilding, we're not going to only rebuild the physical structures and others, and things which have been destroyed, but rebuilding the national fabric is one of the areas which is going to be a big challenge, not only to engineers, but to all other areas. So we have so many bad news that so many people died. We have outbreak of conflict. Since that, we have so many, about 80% of hospitals are out of service. And I know personal experience, my sister's husband is now lying sick, gravely sick, waiting for, he is diabetic. It's very difficult to find insulin. You find the insulin, then you need to have electricity to keep the fridge working so that the insulin will not be destroyed. And that's just personal experience. I'm sure there are thousands and thousands, maybe millions, who are having similar problems. So there's so many bad news from the war. 80 million Sudanese are facing hunger. Age of cultivation of the land declined by 6%, which means potential famine, which actually started to show up. I'm not even talking about the people who have been displaced in war zones like in Darfur, where they're still in the refugee camps. I'm talking about people who are stable, like Jazeera state, which has actually provides Sudan with a lot of food. Roughly 3.7 million children, especially those living in shelters and displaced from war, suffer from malnutrition. 19 million children are out of school. Actually, the schooling was affected since 2019 when the December revolution started, and it's completely stopped in the last full year. And of course, there's full destruction and ransacking of government and civilian buildings, hospitals, schools, universities, homes, banks, factories. The only thing we miss compared to Japan is somebody to throw a nuclear bomb at us, at the country. Fortunately, that has not happened, but I think the level of destruction is really very severe. So it's just like a recap on the situation, and that situation means we need to have the war stop. Why? We don't want reconstruction to become more complicated. We have enough complications now. So if the war continues, it's going to bring more death, more destruction, and add to the complications of rebuilding in terms of cost, in terms of resources required for that. So the question is, what shall we do? The first thing is, I would like to take this opportunity to call on behalf, I hope your federation will give me the 1 minute or so, a call to the warring parties. Please stop the war. Please stop the war. We cannot afford more killing, more destruction. You're going to make rebuilding more difficult for us. So that is one important call. I want to translate it in Arabic, if you allow me. I want to say, يا البرهان قائد الجيش، يا حميتي قائد قوات الدعم السريع، يا المناصرين للجانبين، أرجوكم أو نرجوكم أن توقفوا الحرب التي وصفتموها بالعبثية. It's not only عبثية بل هي مهلكة للشعب السوداني ومهلكة لمقدراته، ونرجوكم أن توقفوا هذه الحرب. لا منتصر في الحرب بل الكل خاسر. وأسألكم بالله ماذا ستفعلون إذا انتصر أحدكم على الآخر؟ كيف تبنوا هذا الدمار؟ ولهذا أناشدكم وأناشد كل الذين يوقدون أو يستمرون في نفخ كير الحرب أن لا منتصر، لا منتصر. أوقفوا الحرب الآن. نرجو أن نسمع منكم قبل نهاية هذا الشهر أنكم قررتم مبدئيا أن توقفوا الحرب، وممكن ندخل بعد ذلك في إجراءات كيف تقف. وهذا نداء من مواطن مثل الملايين الآخرين، ونرجو أن يصلكم هذا النداء. وأخص بأسماء أعرفها: كرتي، أحمد هارون، نافع والآخرين في الجانب الآخر. اتقوا الله في وطنكم وفي مواطنيه واستمعوا لهذا النداء، ونرجو أن ربنا سبحانه وتعالى يعطيكم الحكمة، الشجاعة والحكمة أن توقفوها. لا منتصر فيها. حتى لو انتصر جانب، البناء حيكون أصعب من الدمار. وجزاكم الله خير. And with this, I would like to move to the next slide about rebuilding Sudan. Our motto is, if we break it, we are the ones who are going to fix it. So rebuilding Sudan, there are so many challenges and approach, and I would like to, I think this is going to be one of the roles of Sudanese Engineers Federation and other parties. So expect the Federation to participate in developing a master futuristic economic plan for the country. We don't want to see Sudan like today or yesterday or last year. We want to be Sudan of 2050 for the future generations. Those who have aspired for a better Sudan. So we'd like to expect our federation to be part of that planning. And of course, what's going to happen is we want to address physical plant destruction. We want to address human aspects of destruction. So can we assess the damage? We can assess it today, status quo, but if the war continues, we have to continuously move into assessing it. We have new building plans versus rebuilding plan. What are the resources, financial, professional expertise, and so forth that we have? The example of Japan, Steve mentioned that it was a good education. People are educated. In our case, it is the other way around. We need we need to really educate our population. We need to train them with skills that will build the country. And then we need to talk about partners, donors, international monetary agencies, etc. How can we bring them in to help us in the rebuilding? We need to also come up with a schedule and milestones of the rebuilding. And then we identify the type of skills required to build and create jobs. We would like to look into the human aspects. What is the impact on education? How do we assess impact on basic services? Impact on jobs and well-being? Impacts on relationships? As I mentioned, the fabric, the social fabric has been completely torn. We are now talking along tribal lines. We are fighting on tribal basis. We actually I don't know the English word, undid actually the integration which came to Sudan at one point. So how can we develop plans to address each of the above impacts? Our medical doctors, I think, have to be ready, especially those in psychology fields. Our social workers have to be ready because they also need to work on that. So it's not only buildings or industrial force, it is more than that. So what are the resources we have for rebuilding? How will this initiative be sustained if we have? So I would like to end by throwing a challenge at our Sudanese Engineers Federation and similar organizations to build up networking. You know, we have to network, we have to work together to work first. What would be our role in rebuilding? So what do we have to rebuild? We don't have, of course, our organizations do not have the money or the authority to rebuild, but they will be part of the organizations that will be tasked with the rebuilding. But engineers are going to play definitely a major role in rebuilding, planning for the rebuilding. So maybe we can say, well, let's consider today as the kickoff time. We have just started the process of planning for rebuilding, building relationships, networking, and so forth for rebuilding Sudan. I'm not sure whether Professor Ahmed Uthman Ibrahim is around. If he is, please identify yourself and tell us about what you have been doing. He's an architect, and I think there's a team who have received information from them that they're working on a plan for rebuilding Khartoum, which is the capital or the state, the capital state. So if he's there, can he tell us about what his team is doing? And maybe that could be the beginning of networking. So I'm sure the Sudanese Engineers Federation will be the best place or beginning for going forward. So let's say today is the beginning. I'm sure there are many organizations who is working in that, have initiatives on rebuilding, but can we say today the beginning of all of us trying to come together, build networks for organizations that would be tasked of first plan for the rebuilding, then come up with a real plan for the rebuilding and then moving forward for that. But above all, I hope the warring parties will listen or hear to the call of 40 million plus who are suffering, that dying either directly with the war or through famine or through lack of medical attention. I think I'm going to stop here to give the floor to those who have questions or comments. And I think I have to thank the Federation for giving us this opportunity of presenting. And I have to also thank my friend Steve for his excellent presentation. And today in the beginning, and we continue together in the task of planning and hopefully the actual rebuilding process of Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Abdurrahman, your call to stop the war. And now I may give chances for those who have questions or comments. Maybe I will start with Dr. Marwan. Marwan, please unmute. Okay, maybe Ustaza Aisha Said.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali. Thank you for inviting us to this grand talk or lecture, actually, by Professor Stevenson. Thank you very much for the information you have just given us, which makes us a bit optimistic in spite of what is going on. Actually, much apologize to the grand engineer gathering that my question, which is a very important question to me, concerns my everlasting distress about the situation in Sudan concerning women. My question, doctor, is, have you in your research detected any significance of the Japanese women in the fight for Japan's super growth, economical growth, or what is happening in Japan? Is there any significant role that you could point out that has been run by the women, Japanese women? Thank you very much indeed. But before I step down, I would like also to add another voice to Dr. Abdurrahman, that I hope the fighters would just step down the aisle and let us get along with these optimistic things that we have just heard that we can do through you all gathering here to Sudan to rebuild what has been destroyed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ustazatna Aisha Musa Said, for your question. We'll take one more question before giving the chance to Professor Stephen to answer. Mohammed Shumu, please go ahead. Mohammed Shumu, unmute, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Thank you to all organizers and Professor Stephen for the invaluable lecture. I just wanted to add, or actually draw the audience to an important question related to the subject. As we are talking about rebuilding Sudan after the war, yeah, I think there is something very important we have to think about. I don't claim that I know the answer, but I thought it is a very important point that we need to pay attention to. Is who, assuming that we succeeded in convincing the two parties to stop the war by one means or another, now we got to this point where we are thinking about how to implement the rebuilding plan. An important question related to this is, who will play the role of the US in rebuilding Japan after the war? I think the US has played a very critical, important role. We need an equivalent in our case. We desperately need an equivalent in our case, because it's being well known that as Sudanese, we have a problem. And that is, it's not easy for us to agree and work together. So we desperately need somebody to look after that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed Shummu. Would you like Mr. Steve to comment on Ustaza Aisha and Mohammed Shummu questions and comments?
Yes. That's a really interesting question about the role of the Japanese women in all this. And I did not do a lot of research in that area. The book that I did the book report on, I focused on the last part of the book, which was more on building the economy, looking at more from an economist standpoint. I think the book in earlier chapters covers more of the thinking of the Japanese people, and I think that would be a good place to start to researching that question. I think that's a really key one, and I'm excited to learn more about that as well. The second comment by Mohammed, I agree. That's what came to my attention in looking at the Japanese experience, is that the U.S. certainly played a major role there, and I'm personally hoping that the U.S. will again, and instead of some other country like the Soviets, coming in to help the Sudanese rebuild their country. And just to emphasize again, the thing that came to my mind in doing this research and looking at the questions that any country would have to look at is the importance of the engineering community to be at the table and to be very involved in the decision making about what Sudan wants to be. I hope that it isn't just to go back and look at what Sudan was before the Civil War, but to look at what Sudan can be to be a thriving country in this evolving world. And from what I've learned from Dr. Shwaib, it sounds like the people of the Sudan have so much to offer themselves and the world that I really look forward to the day when their creativity and hard work will be able to build their country and it benefit both themselves and the whole world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stephen. May Mr. Dr. Marwan, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me okay?
Wa alaikum assalam. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, or I should say good morning to those in Arizona. I know about Arizona because I lived there for a long time. I call it my second home, actually. I lived almost 25 years there, so I have fond memories there. I did my doctorate degree at Arizona State University, and I think I may have run into both of you professors when I was there. I lived there about 8 years ago, to come to the Middle East, where I was teaching for 8 years at the United Arab Emirates University in Abu Dhabi, Emirates of Abu Dhabi. My background as an architect and an urban planner, I actually worked as an architect also in the US. It got me when I saw the title of this presentation, I got intrigued by the what I thought is the main topic, which is the rebuilding of the cities, not just the economy. But still, I found it very interesting, and I found the presentation of both of you professors really informative, and give another perspective as to how maybe we can think about rebuilding our own country. But I think maybe the part that needs to be looked into, and that would be another layer of the story of Japan, is how the actual rebuilding of the cities themselves took place. And I mean by that, I'm referring actually to the very first slide that I saw, which showed the Hiroshima city before and after. And so I'm interested in that process of the after, what the municipality's role, what was the building codes, how was the planning itself done, those kind of things. And there may be some information out there that we need to look into as well. So that's just a quick comment, and I say hi to all of you there in Arizona. My question, and it's really not a question, but it's an observation. The fact that Japan was part of the World War, and then the American came over and basically kind of like imposed the way for them to rebuild, gives a different example than our situation in Sudan, because I noticed in one of the slides, the professor was saying something about the Japanese had a different vision as to how they want to build their cities. I mean, their country. The US had a certain limited vision for them, but the Japanese had a different vision. And I'm just intrigued by this word or this term, the Japanese, which kind of like suggests a unified vision that the people can agree on it, which is not the case, as Muhammad, my colleague, Dr. Muhammad mentioned just before, that in our situation, because it's an internal conflict, there is already a dispute between the people themselves as to how the country should be run. So my question on this particular point, what is this Japanese vision? I mean, who's behind it? Are these parties? Are these the elites of the country? And were they talking about it in articles or newspapers? I mean, how did the writer come up with this understanding of their vision? So that's a question that I have. And then as far as the rebuilding of the Sudan, I think what we have to think about, and I totally agree with Dr. Stephen, is the economy. Even at the small scale of building neighborhoods and smaller communities, there got to be an element of economic development, which I think has been missing from many of the plans that I've had the chance to look at. Urban economics, we don't just think of them as I always say to my students when I was teaching urban planning in the UAE, is that we tell the goals of master planning is to provide for the safety, health, and well-being and welfare for the people. But for some reason, the translation of the word welfare or well-being in our societies, it's as if we're talking about something luxurious, something that we can do without. And I think until we come to the understanding that that's part of making life easier for our people, it will be a challenge for all of us to how to approach planning. But thank you so much for the opportunity, and thanks for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Marwan. In this seminar, we have very high participants, very high number of participants. It's around 96 participants. 2, 4, 6, 8 of them are asking for a chance to comment. So I will give this chance to who is calling himself Wad al-Basir. But please be precise. and go
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu
Alaikum
alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Alaikum salam.
Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good morning for the second day, which is Sunday, according to your respective time zone. As in my case here, I'm not engineers. I'm the Chargé d'Affaires of the Embassy of Sudan in Tokyo, and I'm very happy to be with you today. And I thank the organizers on the Sudanese Engineers Federation. And I also thank the presenters for the very informative presentations. I just would like to comment that just few days we established a kind of informal group that bring about highly qualified youth who are resident here in Japan. They studied here. Some of them, they already started to work in different companies or organizations here in Japan. This group consists of different expertise in engineering, doctors, and economists, and many others. So it would be also a good opportunity if you have any kind of advices and recommendations for this group. We will be very happy to receive them. Also, at the very official level, I started to talk with the Japanese government to learn from the Japanese experience in rehabilitating their country and rebuilding their country after the Second World War. In fact, it's not only that experience they enjoy, but also because of the nature of the disastrous environment they have, they also build a very huge expertise in dealing with rehabilitation and reconstruction. So we started to talk with JICA and many others. Yesterday, I met with a special advisor for the Prime Minister. We talked about benefiting from the Japanese experience in this field. But I have also a small comment that I think what we need and what enable the Japanese people to quickly recover from the war. I think one of the major element for success was the unity. I think we need to be united apart from our political, ethnic backgrounds and any kind of differences that could divert us from this very noble objective of rebuilding and rehabilitating our country after this disastrous war. So once again, I thank you very much for this opportunity. I will be more than happy to join you in your future useful workshops and events. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdul Basir. Prof. Stevens, do you have any comment here, or shall we proceed?
I am in complete agreement with the comments that have been made, and I think I'm learning more about the situation in Sudan from all of you, and I would agree that the need for unity, not only in the Sudan but in most countries, is something that we really need to find an answer to. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we'll take two comments from Mr. Ishaq and Ala Jaljal. Would you like, please, Mr. Ishaq, to go on?
Thank you for the opportunity. I just thought to contribute by suggesting one way of contributing for us as engineers and technicians. Obviously, it's not possible to do anything with the current situation before the war is ended and there is stability. Obviously, the reconstruction requires investment. Investors won't come until there is security and good governance, and so on and so forth. But at this point in time, one thing we can do is to maybe paint a picture of the alternative for the warring parties. In its simplest terms, the warring parties are basically after power and money in the most basic form of it. And that can come if there is investment, if there is stability, if there is good governance. They might even be richer as a result of that. And that may be one role we can play to show them what can actually be the alternative of what is happening now. So for example, someone earlier mentioned something about a reconstruction of Khartoum. That could be one way of showing this, but not just the reconstruction as architects and civil engineers, but also the other industrialists amongst us. They can come in with their suggestions of what can be done. The resources in the country are huge, mashallah. So that, I think, is one thing we might be able to do right now before the end of the war.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Engineer Ala Jaljal. Unmute, please. Yes, go ahead. Ala Din Jaljal.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, السلام عليكم جميعا إخوة الزملاء والمهندسين في قطاع الأرض كلكم. Good evening. I would like to thank Dr. Stephen and Dr. Abdurrahman Shaib, Professor Abdurrahman Shaib and Professor Stephen for this lecture. To be honest, I think they have chosen a good example for Japan as an example for this lecture. Actually, Japan is completely destroyed after the war, and the task of building Japan is huge. And we can say this one as a huge task to fix a completely ruined country. So from that lesson, anything can be built after the Japan is being built again. So for us to build our country, Sudan, I think the main issue now, I think the first step is to stop the war as quick as possible, because the war has sequences, and if the war going on, so the devastation is going to be bigger and bigger, and the cost is going to be high in lives, in stock, in many things, in resources, in everything. First, I would like to introduce myself as well. Sorry to forget to introduce myself. I represent the engineering union in Sudan, the Sudanese Engineering Union in UK and Ireland. And all of them, they sending their greeting for all of you. And they thank you for this event. The other thing, as engineers, we have a big task. And then I think most of the people looking at us as a major part, they can play the major part in rebuild the Sudan. This task is not easy, especially Sudan is not being stable for many years, and our resources is not being utilized and used in the better way. So I think my question is going to be, if we look at the past, there is a corruption, there is, we have many raw resources, it's not being utilized. So to get the money is the main thing to use all this stuff to get to our task, to get to our aim. How can we utilize all this stuff, and how Japan overcome all this problem of the corruption, leadership, and we need from Dr. Stephen and Dr. Abdurrahman Shaib to put a recipe for us, a quick recipe, so we can start from there to how we can rebuild the country back better than it before, because before it wasn't really good, to be honest. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I don't want to take your time more than this. Thank you very much anyway.
شكرا باشمهندس علاء جلجال. Dr. Stephen, please.
Well, I really like the idea of painting a picture of what the Sudan can be, and I think it's so important that engineers are part of the artistry of that picture. We understand technology, we understand what is and what can be, and I think it's so important to integrate that into the picture. I also agree with, and I'm beginning to understand more about the differences between Japan and Sudan relative to things like corruption. I think it's much more widespread in Sudan than it was in Japan. And I'm certainly not an expert in that area, but I agree that that's an area of research that needs to be done and would be important. You know, when there's planning for the go forward, the great ideas come from sometimes from folks that we wouldn't think about. And I think in our case, a lot of folks don't think that the engineers can come up with answers more than just our traditional complex problem solving. And I think that this would be a great contribution to look at the issue of how do we resolve the corruption? How do we capture people's imagination to that picture of what the Sudan can be, and to focus on that rather than their individual gaining of more money or prestige through corruption. So I'm not the one to have all the answers, but I'm certainly one to encourage all of us as engineers to participate in that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Wifaq Mahmoud, please go ahead. And next will be Mr. Yusuf Muhammad. Ms. Wifaq.
Yes, okay, thank you very much. And thank you, Professor Stephen, Professor Shoaib, for this presentation about Japan experience after the Second World War. Maybe I have a question, is that where Japan would have been as it is now without the destruction due to the Second World War? And this is question so that we may consider the ongoing war, which we want it to be stopped, I mean, today before tomorrow, as an opportunity. Maybe it is the opportunity for Sudan, for the new Sudan, despite all these sorrows. But I agree with some participants here from the seminar that we need to have a very national plan for the new Sudan, where all of us has to work hard to achieve it. That means men, women, youth, children, politicians, with all different age groups. We have to unite for that. It's not about women doing what or men doing what. We need to have a national plan for that, and it is based on a clear vision for the required change. And our plans need to be ambitious, because change, we can start change now, but we will see it, in the future, that the new generation will see this change. And this clear vision, we need to define a clear goal for that, and we need to define the roles and responsibilities. We have all of us to work, towards this plan. This is what I would like to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Wifaq. Mr. Yusuf Mohammed, please. Yusuf Mohammed. Maybe Mr. Mohammed Jad Karim, if he's ready.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. First of all, thank you, Dr. Stephen, and thank you, Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib, for this great and informative presentation. I really benefited a lot from the presentation. So thanks again. And thank you for the organizers for inviting us and sending an invitation for this valuable and highly needed discussion. I would like to emphasize some of the points that Dr. Shuaib has raised, particularly the call for action that has been raised by Dr. Shuaib, and also emphasizing the networking with other professional and organizational professional organizations. It seems we are in agreement that this task of rebuilding Sudan, and particularly focusing on the impact of education, is necessary for sure after stopping the war. So that requires no doubt partnership with the universities, or between universities and educational institutions and organizations. Also, it is necessary to support the vocational and technical education. We may need to focus on vocational training centers that concentrate on construction or technology. We know the status quo of Sudan in these areas, and we know the change of the Sudanese education system, which now, after this war, it will be a necessity to revisit the type of education in Sudan. And for sure, no such effort without being the government has to be intervened, because the money and resources, it should have been channeled to achieve all those great ideas. So thank you again. And my last point is that for the Federation of the Sudanese Engineers, this is a great presentation, and it is needed. So therefore, as an institution, your institution and other institutions that are organizations that are working on similar initiatives, it is highly needed at this time to coordinate issues and to network together. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mohammed Jad Karim. Thank you. Sure, we'll take that from your comment. We go back to Yusuf Mohammed. Go ahead, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Thanks for the Federation of the Engineering Union. Thanks for Professor Trimble and Professor Abdurrahman. Following the call of Professor Abdurrahman to the fighting two parties, I would like to make a call through Professor Trimble. Although he is a scholar, but I am sure he's near to his government. The difference between Japan and Sudan is that the destruction which happened in Japan was due to a military occupation. But the destruction which is happening now and continuing to happen in Sudan is due to two fighting parties. Both of them are Sudanese. I think everybody knows that there are external forces which are fueling what is happening in the Sudan. The call I'm trying to make through Professor Trimble is that I'm sure United States has all the strengths to stop this war in a week. So I think the external parties, they met in Paris and they can be approached. If they want to stop this war, they can stop it within a week. The next step of building can then happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll give a chance now to Mu'tasim. Please let me draw your attention that we started 7:05. Now it is 9:05. Already we are done with the 2 hours, which we plan to make this seminar. So please make it precise. Mu'tasim, go ahead. And next to him, next to Mr. Mu'tasim, Ahmed Saleh. Who is ready, please go ahead. Unmute first. Mu'tasim Jiddu. Ahmed Saleh.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you for the presenters. As asked by yourself, I'm going to try to be very short. So my first question, how can the economic stimuli facilitate the rebuilding of the new nation in Sudan? Given that the main difference between Japan and Sudan in terms of social structure is that Sudan, we are still largely depending on tribal structure, regional structure, and so on, while Japan was mostly from one ethnicity when the Second War happened. And this is one of the reasons behind the war itself. So how the economic change of the rebuilding, assuming of course that we found the resources, how that can build a role in creating a unified nation. This is my first question, and my second question also is connected to this with finding the resources itself. As the speaker before me has said, that this is a war between two parties within the same country. So we are Sudanese who are actually destroying the country. So what kind of picture or lesson that we can draw from Japan that will help us? Because although Japan was in a war with the United States helped in rebuilding Japan, or played actually the main role. So how can we draw a compelling message that will help actually convince and persuade other nations and the international organizations to help us in our effort in rebuilding our country? And last question, I'm sorry for being lengthy, is that in Japan, moving from the war to the afterwar, the political system has changed. So how did that happen? How can we take some lessons from there to help us in case the war can end by one of the parties win or by both parties go down and have a political agreement? In all cases, we need, of course, to have a new way of governing Sudan, at least to make sure that we will not get into the same trouble again. So how did that happen in Japan? Was it forced by the United States? If there is any lessons that we can take from there and help us in deciding how we go through this journey in the near future, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ahmed Saleh. Dr. Stephen or Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib, do you like to comment?
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a good question about how can we get support from other places to rebuild. I think one area which is very important is the geopolitical situations. Sudan is a unique country. We are in a very, crossroads for many things. There's interest in Sudan for its resources, for its location, and so forth. So we need to be, our politicians later need to be smart enough to play egg and stone together. I was talking to my friend Steve yesterday, and one example is if we look at our neighbors, the Mid-Eastern area, there is a food deficit of $70 billion. What the Middle East importing in terms of food that they cannot grow is $70 billion a year. So that is a very important point. Second is the geopolitical. Now there's a big rush, trying of control in Africa. Russia is working with its parties, making military coup d'etats in different countries to control. China has its also role there. And there are, for example, the Western countries like US and European Union and others, so there's a competition. So we maybe this is where we can really play smart and come up with a situation where we'll go to parties who can really help us because of their interests, not our interests. That is my response to what parties can help us. I just want to add also that this is, I think today's talk is like the beginning of learning from other nations. We have Germany, we have Korea, South Korea, we have in Africa, Rwanda, we have places have been completely devastated and rebuilt. So I suggest maybe this will today's talk will become like a beginning of learning about other experiences. You found that Ukraine, the present war of Ukraine now have a body for reconstruction, body already started from day one. Since the war between Russia and Ukraine started, they have an organization which looking at that reconstruction. So people can start early enough, and we can also look at the experience of others about how they could make use of their relationships. Ukraine is depending on Europe, and they have actually an office in UK and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities for us too. So this is my comment. I will leave the rest to Steve. Do you want to add a comment?
Well, I think all the comments are being made are certainly I resonate with. I really don't understand the situation in Sudan, so I can't really comment. I'm beginning to start from the comments, understand more of the situation. But one thought I had, trying to talk to being a citizen of the United States and getting the attention of the government is not easy for one person. But my thought is I'm active in Rotary International, which is the largest service organization in the world. And we have a part of our program is for peace. And it would seem to me that this would be something that we ought to be bringing up to organizations like Rotary that have huge following, not only in the United States, but throughout the world. And we've conquered polio, and now we need to focus on conquering these civil wars and focus on benefiting the people of the country. So my suggestion is tap into some of those organizations to help with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm asking the permission to extend the seminar few more minutes, please, Mr. Stephen and Mr. Abdurrahman. Some people are really interested to participate in this interesting topic.
It's okay with me.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. May I give a chance to architect Lamia Musa? Lamia Musa, please go ahead. Next to that, we will listen to Mu'tasim Jiddu. And Lamia Musa, if she's not ready, unmute, please. Maybe Mu'tasim can go ahead. Usama Ahmed, are you ready? Usama? Try now, Usama. I unmuted you. Try again, Usama.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to thank Professor Dr. Steve and Rahman Shuaib. My name is Usama Sid Ahmed. I am from economic background, but also a contractor. My comment is, and I think after the war, we need to have economic approach for the rebuilding and construction of Sudan. And what I mean by an economic approach, we should identify national and regional infrastructure projects that can qualify Sudan economy to grow. When we identify infrastructure projects well selected, we can find finance and investors easier for such projects. And for example, and we should have to divide the projects into two parts. Part one, national projects. Now in Sudan, we have 10,000 kilometers of roads. Our network is approximately 10,000 kilometers of roads. We need to rehabilitate this first, the 10,000 kilometers. Then after that, if we have more funds and more finance, we can expand by 20%, 30%. Second priority, we need in Sudan, we have big deficit for generating power. So we need to invest in generating power so that we can be self-sufficient in power. Third national project, which is Port of Sudan. Sudan Port has, we need to rehabilitate the port. We need to build infrastructure projects for exporting, like silos for the grains. We need to build storage facilities for fuel that can keep to have at least, and then we can go to the national regional projects. And what I mean by regional projects, Sudan has 6 big regionals: Darfur, Kordofan, the North, Blue Nile, and etc. For each region, we should design and select an infrastructure projects for each region, which is roads and power also, and telecom already we have. When each region become qualified for economic growth, then we can have a national integration between those regions. For example, if we have a good infrastructure in each region, Darfur can be a hub for exporting meats. Kordofan can be a hub for agro-industries. North of Sudan can be a hub for building materials industries and extra, and so on. My conclusion I believe we should have a economic approach. So when the economy moves and grow, that will help to generate more money and more finance for more projects and for rebuilding and construction. Thank you very much.
Osama.
This is in brief.
Thank you very much, Osama. Sid Ahmed.
جاهز لو سمحت. معتصم.
Mu'tasim, go ahead.
طيب first, thank you for all. There is something I don't say I disagree, but it's not our first priority. Where are more of the people now? They are in the regions. So people just now, they are concentrating on Khartoum. No, please, forget Khartoum now. Because what is happening now, for example, I will say, is a Saud. There is no even this in the regions because it's concentrated on Khartoum. Let us begin with the regions, outer regions, okay? Then go back to, go back to Khartoum, not reconstructing Khartoum. This is our main problem. Now we have, as the speakers before me said, we have to concentrate on the regions first, then come back to Khartoum, because it will grow by its people there. But as a national schemes, we have to begin from the regions. Okay, let us go back to the engineers. Okay, engineers, they are the first to reconstruct as after the economic issues. Okay, so where are the engineers? Are they qualified? When after this war, I have training many, I mean many graduate engineers. Well, I am ashamed of how they have been graduated. An IT can't use the computer. And the worst is an architect can't design or can't draw. These are graduates. We have to concentrate on training them. Really, I say an IT can't use the computer, and an architect graduated, and as an architect, I don't tell them architect, can't design or draw. So please begin, let us now begin, as before that, begin to qualify our engineers, our graduates. And I see that Dr. Jamal Mahmoud is here. Please, Jamal, see what is happening on your colleges. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Mu'tasim. Professor Saad, please go ahead and mute.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much indeed. My name is Saad Tayyisir al-Sheikh, Arizona State University, from College of Liberal Arts and Sciences in the School of International Letters and Cultures. I'm head of Classics and Middle Eastern Studies. I don't have a question. I just wanted to say thank you very much indeed to Dr. Stephen and to Dr. Abdurrahman Shuaib for this very important seminar, and for Dr. Adil and the Federation of Sudanese Engineers. And I'm very proud, that both professors giving this seminar are from our, prestigious university, Arizona State University. And I'd like to also emphasize that I also represent the, ASAPA, which is Association of Sudanese American Professors at American Universities. And Dr. Shuaib has a very strong project, in rebuilding educational institutions in Sudan after the war. He gave two seminars in that regard for our associations, and also for our education and training and research unit at the UCANA, which is the Organization of Sudanese American alumni of the University of Khartoum. So thank you very much indeed for this excellent seminar to benefit from Dr. Stevens' Trimble's research on how Japan rebuilt after World War II, and how that can be benefiting Sudan to rebuild as well after this brutal war. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, Professor Saad. Good to know you. Then the last chance I will give to architect Lemia or engineer Jafar Ahmed Ali. Whomever is ready, engineer Jafar or architect Lemia or and.
طيب السلام عليكم شكرا جزيلا باشمهندس عادل. Thank you very much for all the people who attended this seminar. And I will start with thanking Professor Stephen and sorry, I lost it. Okay.
Trimble.
Yes, Professor Trimble for the very informative presentation, and he put a good base for us to discuss about rebuilding Sudan. Actually, on behalf of Federation of Sudanese Engineers, and I would like to give a brief background of this project we are handling now. It is a very expected project to give a good understanding of what is going to be discussed and planned for the future after the war. Our project is called the National Project for Development of Sudan. And it is mainly, when it was planned, it is mainly for the development of the national people before the project of the infrastructure of development or rehabilitation or building the country. And that is why, because we believe that you cannot rebuild the country without developing the people. So our first priority is to accompany or to spread this knowledge all around the country, starting with the development of the education, starting from the primary schools until the universities and colleges, as my colleague Mr. Mu'tasim, he just stated. We have conducted more than 20 seminars, diversified from industry development, agriculture development, infrastructure, and the thing that we are lacking, or we want the participation from the people, that is how to develop the people. As all of us, we know that Sudan has one of the largest percentage of illiterate people, and this is one of the obstacles that could never help our project or plans to go ahead without problems. So I don't want to talk much. So this will be a first step on our project, and would like to invite all the people who are here with us to participate and to send all suggestions to our website, and which could be Adil, if you can highlight it at the end of the seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Jafar. Engineer Salah Bashir, are you here? Salah? Okay. Then I think we reach an end to this interesting seminar, and we'll make all the efforts to convince
Adil.
Yes, please. Engineer Salah is the president of Sudanese Engineering Federation. Could you conclude the talk here, please?
Actually, Jafar have put a very good conclusion. Thank you very much for the professor, and also for Professor Hussein. This is it was a very good seminar, very good presentations done by the two professors. And one of the most important things, يعني إنه the number of the participants exceeded all the number that we witnessed in all the previous seminars, which shows the importance of the seminar, that we are looking forward for see the experiences of other countries. As Dr. Shoaib said, it's not only Japan, it's even in Africa, Rwanda, Korea, and others. The most important thing, as addressed by افتكر يوسف, باشمهندس محمد يوسف, is the unity of our civil society. And I think this is the basic. The difference between Japan and Sudan, the situation in Japan, that all the people were united, and they were devastated by a third party, by the war. But as also mentioned by others, our problem in Sudan is that we are distracted by our own people and by the differences between our own civil society, political parties. Unless we get together at the united body, we will never stop the war. Unless we get together as a united civil society, we cannot build the country, and we'll continue fighting forever. And I think together with our mission on seeking how to rebuild Sudan, I think parallelly we should also put some effort on how to unite the civil society. And we are part of this civil society as engineers. We believe this is another role, another important role, how to unify all the civil society. And I suggest that we carry on with this mission as the parallel party. Thank you very much for the presenters. Thank you for all who participate. And as Jafar say, we will continue in different areas as we started before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Salah Bashir. I was saying we will pursue Dr. Stephen and Dr. Shoaib to do another seminar sometime after we prepare for the same topic, but into depth, into solutions, rather than going forward from showing the problem to showing the solutions. By this, we came to an end, and I will give the last chance to Dr. Stephen to say goodbye.
I want to thank you for the opportunity. I thank especially Dr. Shoaib for encouraging me to go back and reread the book and put together this presentation. I have learned a lot, and I have learned a lot on this seminar today. And my heart goes out to all those who want to see Sudan recover from this civil war. And it was an honor to participate in this seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Abdurrahman Shoaib, you want to say goodbye?
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. And I just want to give the thank to, give you a little bit on how this started, actually. The first day when I saw a video about destroying the University of Nyala. It was very painful video to watch. And then we have a WhatsApp group, and I sent a message to that group and said, have you seen this situation? And they said yes. And they said, then I asked, how can we participate? What can we do to change the situation? So that group, which is led by Professor Suad Taysir, they said, well, why don't you come up with some ideas and let's discuss it in UCANA meeting, which is the Federation for the University of Khartoum alumni. And we did. And then they said, well, why don't you have another meeting? So we linked also with ASAPA. So I just want to thank UCANA and ASAPA for actually being the main trigger for this activity. And then Bashmandis Adil, I think, came to know about our presentation. Then I think he suggested, participating. And as Stephen has mentioned, discussion came and we were able to get Stephen drafted to the cause of Sudan, and he's a very caring person, and I thank him a lot for this very successful presentation. And one question, Steve, can you get into American Civil War? What happened after that? People killed each other, and then something happened. The country was rebuilt. Maybe that would be an area for future, learning, which is it's a civil war.
Yes, that would. I agree. That would be a good one to look at.
Right, and then I just close by thanking the Federation. And definitely, I think this has brought a lot of ideas on the table. And do your best, continue to function. Engineers always are problem solvers. So we'll try to continue to do that. And I have so many colleagues with you guys. I don't remember some names. I've not seen all of them, but all my colleagues, I thank you very much for excellent work you're doing in your federation. And we look forward to networking. I think I'm going to emphasize networking. We want to network with all efforts which are working in the direction of rebuilding Sudan, social, economical, engineering, all kinds of aspects. So just keep networking and try to build a good coalition that will be more effective in building our beloved country, Sudan. And thank you again. And best wishes for, first, the best wish is to hear that the war is going to stop tomorrow, not, later. And the other is to succeed in rebuilding our country. And I just want to emphasize the point that we said master plan, master futuristic economic plan. So that's the beginning. And our colleagues who mentioned and talked about this area, that's what we hope we'll be able to have. Thank you again. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Thank you, everybody. Please join our group to get information about all our next activities. And we hope the war will stop soon. Thank you and bye-bye.
I'm going to share the recording.
Yes, it will be uploaded in the YouTube the day after tomorrow. And I will give you the link.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.